everyone. My name is Ari, and I'm a kindergarten teacher.
Hi, my name is Katie, and I'm a second grade teacher.
And we are here today with our second episode of Play Talk. The American Association of Pediatrics recognizes that play is not just about having fun, but about taking risks, experimenting, and testing boundaries. Play builds the brain and the body. As a kindergarten teacher, I see the impacts that open-ended play has on students' social and linguistic development. So, just to give a very quick example, right now in our house area, we have a veterinarian office set up, and you really hear children learning from each other. Words that really wouldn't come up naturally in our curriculum, like talking about a stethoscope or talking about giving medicine and a syringe. And these are really opportunities that children learn from each other and are engaged in play in a meaningful way. In the other areas in our room, the block area, the art area, science area, you're really starting to see that the information that you give them and the scaffolding that you provide, now they're taking that into their own context through play. So even in the science area, when they're using magnets or magnifying glasses, they're using this vocabulary that is a lot more complex, more robust. It's changing throughout the year. So um, as a kindergarten teacher, I really get to see what that looks like from coming in from pre-K. They have the same pre-K centers in my district, so they already know what these areas look like, but the conversations just become a lot more sophisticated. So today we're going to have the opportunity to speak with another kindergarten teacher from another district and get her perspective on play and language development in her classroom as well.
We are here today with Celeste Ramirez. She is a kindergarten teacher who will provide us with with her experience of developing the language of some of our youngest learners. So I kind of want to lead straight into our first question that we have. We see so much language develop naturally through play, and we would like to know what your experience is with play centers in your kindergarten classroom.
So, since I've been teaching as long as I have, when I first started with kindergarten, play was a very big part of our curriculum. We did use it a lot to build that language. Now, not so much. Now it's a lot of the academics, but we have kind of like, especially with the dual language program that we are in, we do try and use a lot of vocabulary, a lot of language with partner pairing and speaking with each other. So that kind of helps. Well, it does help with some of those language developments for the kiddos. But with the centers, I think it was just more of a natural thing for them because, we used to have, the dramatic play and they would go in and they would play, kitchen, and then it would change, and maybe we would do a little store, and we used to do little vet
Yes.
plays.
Yes,
And
Ari just mentioned she's doing a vet right now.
yes, and those are so much fun because they get that experience of things, and vocabulary and using that and just that talking with each other and that playing and pretending with each other. So, we used to do that a lot in the past, but I think, it has changed so much. We used to have coordinators who would come in who were early childhood. And if you didn't have your centers, it was like, yes, yes, where's this center? Where is this center? Where is this center? But then I guess with our district and those struggles as far as the STAR testing and those things, everything kind of got pushed.
Yeah.
And so now I see it more, of course, with the pre-K, because I even taught pre-K at one point, and everything was done in centers, everything in pre-K, and that was fun.
Yeah,
I enjoyed pre-K.
Yes, I know the way Ori describes her classroom. I'm like, oh, that sounds so cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like our kids are missing out on that opportunity to go ahead and build that language and even just be able to build those other skills that they can obtain through play, like problem solving, advocating for themselves, mirroring what it is that they see in life, especially if you're doing a store
Mhm.
or the vet. I mean, some kids haven't gone to a vet, so that's a good experience for them to see and to get to explore.
And so now even within the past couple of years, we've even gone away from any kind of center work because when we're doing our small groups, they are working on their iStation, on their minutes, because they have to have this many minutes in math, this many minutes in reading for their on their iPads. And so we had changed into word work and those kinds of things, and we would do those activities. But then it came to be where these activities, we'd have principals that would come and say, well, okay, they're doing this, but what is the product? What is the product? It's like, well, it's not necessarily something you can see all the time.
Yeah.
It's their communication, it's their talking, it's their, like you
Their
said,
language
problem
is
solving,
changing,
and all of that, and you're not necessarily going to get a product every time in every center.
Yeah. And I'm an ESL teacher, so I know you mentioned being a dual language program, but some of my EB students that really struggle in the whole group or in reading stations and math stations, like playtime is where they blossom. There's so much less pressure. It's a time for them to really use language that they hear, which we know children develop first the social language before the academic language. So when they're in a low stress environment and they're picking up on, give me that, and I want that. I mean, all of that is a starting point in English and developing English language. So I honestly, it's hard for me to imagine my day without play because of some of my EBs who that really sometimes the only time I hear them speaking is when they're playing and they're in the art center and then they're developing first, they're developing the color words and number words and things like that. And so, yeah, it is hard to imagine. And I'm sure you've really been able to see that timeline change and really impacting your students, which kind of leads us to the next question is some of the changes that you've noticed, and not really necessarily just in play, but also in music, in movement. What have you noticed in outdoor time? Have those parts of your day changed also in your 32 wonderful years in kindergarten?
They definitely have, and it's not that they don't encourage us to do it, but with the new science of reading and the phonological awareness, and that does play a big part. And when I first started, it was letters, sounds, and a lot of this phonological awareness would kind of go by the way. We would rhyme, we would do beginning sounds, but it's just gotten so much more in depth as far as the understanding that they have to have this foundation in order to learn to read. But we try and still do music, but some of that has gone, and we're lucky that we have music at our school, so they do hear that, and but even just like old songs, I try and still incorporate, because that's what I loved. I love the singing and I love the read alouds and those things, and so I still try and
incorporate them as best as you can, given like the set structure that you were now supposed to be implementing. I totally understand.
And and from way back then to now, they haven't changed in that fact that they love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when I start singing a song, I said, "You don't know that song?" No, and we start singing, and they are just mesmerized because they love it so much. And with the as far as play recess, I mean, we do have 15 minutes of recess.
Yes,
But at one point, I remember we used to have 2 recess times. We would have a structured recess, and then we would have a free recess. So the structured, the PE coach would have to have, and okay, that was pre-K. That was pre-K. But even I think after that, and we would rotate. So like one day the coaches would have something out, and we would, like, one class would do that activity while the rest would have free. But that's important for them, that running around, that playing, that
that not having to sit down and listen to someone speaking, or having to get your attention on somewhere.
Or just fresh air. Sometimes I will just take my kids
Sunlight
Yes.
does the body good.
It does.
Definitely does.
It does me good. I want to
Yeah.
be outside. I love going out.
Exactly.
And if it's
Exactly.
chilly, I'm in the sun. I was like, I'm going to stand in the sun.
Yes.
And they love. And then you see, like you say, those kiddos who don't have the English language, the
yeah, the
language, and then
speak.
they're out there. They find their friends,
Yeah.
or they're talking with the
Exactly.
English friends.
Mhm.
I've had kiddos come in like their first day, no English, and they're already playing tag because they know,
Mhm.
oh, that's a game that we all play.
Yes.
So I know how to do that. Oh, I see a swing. I can swing on a
I know
swing.
how to
Like
sing.
it's something that's universal for them. Play is
Mhm.
universal for all of them. And it's just a little sad that we don't have it as much in our district.
Or a little longer.
Or a little longer, yes.
Yeah, from pre-K. Yeah. But going
Yeah.
back to the music also, like I completely agree, but I think it's something that as kindergarten teachers, we have to be so intentional about, which is hard for some new teachers because it's almost like if you don't know, how will you know to do that, right?
Yeah.
So with the rhyming, like if you are not already used to singing the songs and the finger plays and moving your body to certain rhymes, like how will you know that that is something that's an option or that's available, you know? So I feel like you just have to be very intentional with even now having phonics time really explicit and all that phonemic awareness. And I don't know exactly the outlines of your curriculum, but ours looks a lot like Heggerty. So a lot of the arm movements and the clapping and the blending, but so much of that, like you're saying, is like before we were so structured with it, it came naturally, right? You
Right.
were segmenting and you were blending and you were rhyming. It was just less meta linguistics involved and thinking about it and labeling digraphs, you know?
Exactly.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
just feel like it's really now it's like, okay, I see that today we're working on blending or rhyming with blends, right? Okay, what songs do I know that have blends in them and things like that, right? So one of my favorites is like today we're working on blends right now. And today I taught my kids the Itsy Bitsy Spider. Some of them don't know that, you know, and so we're doing the spider movements, and especially my EBs, I have some that are coming. I have some that are coming from Turkey and coming from Jordan, and like what they don't know, they don't know. And so here, you know, we're taking the time, and some of mine who were here for pre-K, they're teaching each other and like, oh, it's not like this, it's like this, and making sure they know the movements and things like that. But I just feel there's so many ways to incorporate that learning in a more playful way, right? But if you don't know, like I said, so
And because it's changed so much, a lot of the new teachers, like you said, they don't know this. They
right.
don't know that part to them, or but see, we've even had where administrators are not familiar with early childhood. My best
Exactly.
years of teaching early childhood was when I had administrators who knew early childhood.
Yeah.
Because before that it was like, okay, well, go ahead and do you, and they wouldn't come in. They didn't want to
Yeah.
know or see because they were little, and
Yes.
Yeah.
You're all over the place.
I'll never forget. We used to do walks where each grade level would come in, and I was doing pre-K at the time, and they came in and they were all playing. They all had their centers, and we're working with them, and they're with blocks. They're building a garden, and one of the second grade teacher says, "Oh, so this is the dirt," and the student looked at, "No, this is soil." So they would very proud of themselves that they knew these. And I always would tell them, this is a big word. This is a word they use in third grade. You're going to learn the big boy word, the bigger word. And they would, and so they're like, oh, yes, I can do this.
Ownership, which is great.
Yes.
Okay, so leading into our next question. So knowing we are a part of a dual language program, how do you help promote language within your classroom for those students? I know you mentioned the partner pair talks, but what else do you do, especially since you work with little ones who it's their first time for many of them being in the classroom?
Right. Well, we've had some really good training with the dual language as far as doing the, what is it called? The
PBR?
Yes.
The preview view review. Yes.
And so making sure that they know that our Spanish speakers and our English speakers see the vocabulary in both the English and the Spanish. color coding. Spanish is green, English is blue. Doing that partner pair where they are turning and talking, and we use a lot of sentence stems. So they are having to ask. They can't say, just,
Water.
they have
Yeah.
to answer a
Yeah.
sentence, right? They have to ask the
Yes.
question and they
Mhm.
have to answer in a complete sentence, and then they reverse roles. Doing that, just using a lot of objects, using, charts where they are labeling. And so we'll label because I'm the English teacher and we everything's in English, and then we label it in Spanish, or I'll send it with the Spanish teacher and then she'll label. So they see all that. So they're building that vocabulary and that comprehend that language with the words. And
One of my favorite units is in the fall with the pumpkins and opening the pumpkin up and letting them get all the guts, and they're using all that vocabulary. Oh, it's slimy. Look at the strings are so long. There's so many seeds, and I just love using real objects anytime I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's definitely, I feel like, important because a lot of kids aren't used to seeing all of those things sometimes. They're used to just seeing pictures. So that leads into this next one. So in chapter 9, Otto states that language goals in kindergarten focus on enhancing development of receptive and expressive language, oral and written language knowledge. Do you feel like that language development occurs positively using your current provided curriculum? And if not, why? Why so?
I think with our curriculum, we use HMH. And, our lessons are, we go by the curriculum week by week. I just think that the writing part, it's kind of hard because if they're not interested and they're not buying into the topic, it doesn't mean anything to them.
That there's no connection that's able to be made
no
between
connection.
them.
We're talking about, plants and this, but then they want them to write a letter. Okay. Different things.
I feel like it's misaligned sometimes. With, like, the reading lesson doesn't really align so much with the writing component sometimes. And I've noticed that as well in the upper grades. So I didn't realize it was also happening in the lower grades too, but
because with us, a lot of it is modeling. We do model a lot.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of it is giving them that sentence stem. And then, so I'll give them a sentence stem and I'll say, okay, now you're going to write. And so them trying to, sound out the word, like today, I like to eat. We were been talking about plants, parts of plants we eat. And so they were having to sound out the words. I said, just use the sounds, But, to me, that's more meaningful to them. Or, when we used to do whole language. I don't know if you all are familiar with whole language.
I have not.
So whole language, everything was involved. Everything was incorporated, and our writing went along with that.
Wow.
And I used to do a multi-age where I had pre-K, K first in one classroom.
Wow.
And the pre-K, this was when pre-K was half day. They'd go home and I'd have the kinder. So I'd have a small group and we would do a whole group writing. Whole group writing. And just everything being combined, I think made it more interesting to them and meaningful to them when they would write.
Yeah. Because I can see the disconnect sometimes with writing because I'm like, my kids haven't, like, even me myself, I'm like, my kids haven't seen this, and I have to build, like, that background knowledge. And it's like, I don't think that's taken into consideration when, like, these instructional materials, like, adopted, and they're like, we're going to implement this because they're hearing raging reviews, like, it's great. And don't get me wrong, it has its benefits, and it does, but for the setting of the students that we work with, it doesn't quite work as well as I think they would want it to.
Right.
So,
and just themes and things like that they understand. But, with the writing part, like I said, it just does not align. And so that's what makes it harder. And so,
do you feel like it's developmentally appropriate what they're asking them to do?
No. And I know that every single time.
But that's why I want to ask, because I know I spoke with Ari about it, and I showed her, like, a preview of what our curriculum look like? And she's like, an opinion piece. And I was like, yeah. She's like,
and that was like the third week of school.
Yeah.
And like for us in the third week
Yeah.
of school, our writing is our in our curriculum, our writing unit in the first quarter is still pinching, tweezing, stringing beads,
across the district.
all fine motor building. And then
This is a curriculum that all of Northside Kinder uses, correct?
yes, yeah. So
Okay.
this is like the very beginning, all we're doing is working fine motor. And then we get into writing. And at first, it's really just writing your name, celebrating your name, writing little writing, not going straight into opinion pieces. A lot of our year is narrative writing about yourself, all about me. What do I like? What are my colors that I like? And things like that. But I do feel like, and I talked with Katie, that ours is a little bit slower progression, which I feel makes it more developmentally appropriate, just knowing where all your kids start. And then some of them don't have pre-K. Some of them don't have English.
Exactly. And I feel like that's often forgotten. Like some of these kids, not even kinder's required, I know. So that's why I'm like, I'm like, really? Some of these kids have never had pre-K, or maybe have not had the opportunity to attend daycare or any pre-K 3s or pre-K 4s. And this is their first time being in a formal setting where they have to listen to another adult other than mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever is in charge of them. And it's like a little bit of, it's a shock to them sometimes. So, and then getting them to be like, okay, now write your name and also write at least 2 to 3 sentences. Like that's crazy to me.
And like you said, it should be more of that developing their fine motor, because then they're not going to be able to hold a pencil if they, if they're not
able to grasp. Exactly.
And so, I don't agree. I mean, we used to follow Gentry. I don't know if you know Gentry. And he was very developmental, and you give them a sheet, you'd give them a topic, and they would draw, and that's their writing, and you would underwrite. And then slowly you start to see the progression. Okay, now they're going to start writing sounds for words, counting the words in this, in a sentence, and those kinds of things. But I just,
and our rubrics also lend themselves to developmentally appropriate practice, because we will take drawings as credit if we give a prompt and we tell them, write about your favorite summer memory. If they're able to draw a picture that looks like it's in response to the prompt, then they get credit for that on a grading rubric as well. So
it's developmental for them. And if they can express it, they can show it.
Of course.
And then they can tell you about it.
And one thing I think a lot of people don't realize is that also in kinder, some of the students can't draw obvious pictures. You look at their pictures and it does not look like a person or a house or a car. So even that takes time to build. Directed drawings, drawing for them, modeling, this is a square and a triangle, and explicitly teaching them how to draw very basic objects. I don't think a lot of people realize like that is also something that develops in kindergarten. So
yes, we do. We see it. I always, every year, I always do a self-portrait in the beginning of the year, and then do one at the end so they can see the difference.
That's my big project. My yearly project is that's their keepsake, is a monthly portfolio. So every month they draw their picture and they write their name, and I just swear by that activity because it's the most meaningful thing. Like, in the beginning of the year, I have some that like they're holding the pencil like they're the earthquake monitor. Like they're just scratching the paper and they can't hold it. They can't form any letters. And then by the end, their portraits have hair and noses and ears, and their letters are beautiful. That's to me one of the most amazing things I give my families, because I'm like, look, like the proof is in the pudding, people. A lot of development there. And speaking of rubrics and checklists, we kind of wanted to touch on your experience with using checklists to monitor students' language development. So there was a lot of checklists that were provided in this chapter for us, and they looked at 4 main competencies, which included oral language, phonological awareness, written language, and reading related concepts. So we wanted to know how you use or what that has looked like. Maybe it's changed for you over the years, but how you feel like it benefits your students or your teaching practices.
Well, just being able to use a rubric like that, just, because it has to be something quick. I mean, it's not something that, you're sitting and writing. It's like, okay, yes, you've got it. So that makes it easier to see. Our report card is basically a rubric. We do check those, they're either providing or satisfactory. I do a lot, like when I'm assessing them every 6 weeks or every 3 weeks with progress monitoring as well. We get reports from there as far as how they're doing with their phonological awareness or their letter sound concepts. So, they change, and whatever works, I've used several things over the years. Different things. So,
but do you feel like they're beneficial overall? As something you'd like to continue to use?
I think they do, because then that just kind of keeps you on track. Of course, with those kiddos that okay, so they're having difficulty here. So what exactly is it that they are having difficulty with? And so, I think they're important.
Good. Awesome. So that pretty much wraps up our interview. Thank you very much for being here. We do appreciate it. So overall, as we know, play is crucial for a child's language to develop and to obtain other skills. Unfortunately, due to accountability measures in some districts here in Texas, play has been replaced with learning centers to focus more on the academic success. So we need help from our families to help in the play area. So parents, grandparents, or guardians can help incorporate play at home by going for nature walks at local parks or using nature items to help promote creativity. They also learn best from hands-on experiences, so limiting that screen time can also help be beneficial for them as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think knowing that push down academics has gone all the way to kinder and pre-K, our kids are really losing out on that social time. And Katie has talked about this, that they're losing problem-solving skills. They're losing executive functioning skills, memory skills, independence skills. That's something that they're missing out on by losing out on playtime. So like you mentioned, we really just want to encourage our families, take on that role of playing with your child or offering them opportunities to play with other children outside of school. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Play Talk. Join us next time for our final episode on language assessment in early childhood.